Okay, psychologists are scientific. So now we've looked at individual behavior and mental processes, and now we're looking at the scientific approach. So we're looking at why the scientific approach is important in psychology. Because, so a good recap activity I like is we just project this on the board and then just write two terms that are somewhat related. They could be different in a way or similar in a way, and just put them up there and get students to discuss with the neighbor how they might be related. There's a placeholder slide. You can add your own stuff in here, or you can make a specific questions, right? You can add a specific question here, and so how are these things different? So here I wanted them to distinguish between behavior and cognitive processes. What this does is it not only gets them thinking about what these words mean, but then also a little bit deeper about some way in which they're related, different, similar, or whatever question you're asking. So it's a really good recap activity. It takes zero planning, maximum engagement from the students. Yeah, and I like it. Okay, traffic lights, color cards, how well can they answer these questions? And so you can just do a quick bit of check-in here. You can get them to share with a partner as well before you check in with the traffic lights if you like. All right, so basically, yeah, so they hold up a green if they get it, a yellow if they're not sure, and a red if they've got no idea, okay, for each of those questions. So we watch a TED Talk. This is 15 minutes, so it's on the long side, but it's quite interesting. What I would do is get them, as they're watching it, give them some focus questions so that they are focused on the video and that they're trying to think actively while they're watching. And one is, what are the myths? So see if they can comprehend and remember, and then give them a little bit of a quiz at the end. And what we're really trying to get them here to do is look at why the study is important in psychology. And the third question here really is addressing the same thing, or just guiding them a little bit more into answering that. The answer really here is that the studies helped disprove the myth. Right, and so that's what here we're introducing the idea of evidence. Psychology is an evidence-based subject, and so we need to have the evidence before we can have any sort of knowledge. And these myths came about because they weren't grounded in empirical evidence. Okay, and so then after the video, they can think, pair, share. They begin to a problem. There's a real basic problem. This is in the workbook that they complete. Right, and they should be able to all solve this pretty simply. We want to grow tomatoes. Does fertilizer work? How would I test it? And so that hopefully they'd get an experiment group and a control group, maybe not by using that language, but just by intuition, right? And then a bit of chalk and talk, the scientific method. Can gloss over this a little bit, but here we look at it specifically in psychology, right? And so we can talk about how a researcher might come about studying a behavior in psychology and using this method. Okay, quick chance for a Q&A, and then a bit of a summary. Empirical evidence versus anecdotal evidence, because this leads into the next example in the workbook. There's a list, and that they're related. This is just a very brief summary, but there's a list of types of evidence, and then they just write down, is it anecdotal or empirical? Because students always want to use anecdotal evidence in the beginning of the course, so we're going to stamp that out and get them thinking about what does the research say. Right? If we're answering questions in psychology, the first question we ask ourselves is, it needs to become the first question, what does the research say? As opposed to, well, what do I just think about that? All right? And then one question here is, what type of evidence is more credible and why? That can be something to think about for fast finishers. And then they can answer the guiding question and the critical thinking extension. All right, and then that's the end of that introduction topic. So what we did there was just break down the studying mental processes and behavior, studying individuals, and studying it scientifically. And then the next, we're going to look at a really brief introduction into research methodology, focusing mainly on the experimental method. So that's next.